what do you mean a system that men set up?
Who made rules of war? Men.
Humans. What does it have to do with men? Wait, hold on. Just to be clear. So if most people in power are men, but that only represents 0.00001% of the population,
then men deserve to die in war.
Men are only 0.01% of the population.
The men
in power, the kind of power that you're talking about.
How many Russian males are there versus how many Putins are there?
Right, but the system is still set up by men, and so you're complaining about a system.
How do you know it has to do with because they're men?
Because that is
they happen to be men.
If there was, can I just ask one question? If there was a system that was set up by men and exclusively by men that made men walk into a hole that was going to be to bury them and kill them, right? And they just were walking into there all day. A million of them died, but it was set up by men. Would it be unfair?
Okay. Is that unfair to men versus women? Is that
your
argument?
Would it be unfair to the men who that was happening to?
I mean, if they're dying, sure, it's unfair to anybody who dies.
So then it doesn't necessarily about if there's a guy in power who set it up.
No, I'm saying if you're complaining about rules that affect men, but the rules were set up by men, what do you expect? That's who set up it's not women being unfair to men and saying, let me make these rules to disqualify.
Actually, you know what, the funny thing is that men are actually so benevolent when it comes to this sort of thing, because if they wanted to, they could conscript women and send them off to the front lines to die. But instead, you know what they send off? Other young men. Other 18, 19, 20-year-old young men to go die in the hundreds of thousands.
You're complaining about the system, but then you're justifying it.
What do you mean I'm justifying it? How am I justifying it?
You're saying that men do this.
No, I'm just talking about from the female purview. From the female purview, you can say that it's all men who set it up, but also it's men who take all of the responsibility, and it's all men who are dying in it as well. They take all of the responsibility. They have all the duties when it comes to war.
Right, but that's the system that we're complaining about 2 minutes ago, and I said, how are you complaining about it if men are the ones that set up the system?
Wait, just to be clear, do you think infinitely complex geopolitical conflicts, it all just boils down to, a man happened to be in position of power? Like not. if a bad thing happens, and it happens to be a man who was in a position of power, it's like somehow the men who are negatively impacted by that it's not as severe because a man in position of power.
No, that's not what I'm saying.
Why don't we also why do we look at it in that way? Like, what are you trying to communicate by saying, well, who set that system up?
Well, because you were
are you victim blaming?
No, you're complaining about the system, but I'm saying that men set up that system. So if you're complaining about the system, that's what was set up by men.
I mean, this seems like to be a bit of a logical fallacy. What's your point?
I just said my point
several
times.
Are you saying
this is just
but are you saying that the grievance is of less concern?
You can ask somebody else something.
Oh, you're just gonna disengage? I mean,
no, I've said it several times, but you keep asking me the same question, hoping that I'm getting a different response.
I'm not asking you that.
I'm not doing that.
I've literally asked you a different question. Are you trying to suggest by pointing out, well, it happens to be a very small minority of men who had some degree of power supposedly set the system up?
No,
of course ignoring certain biological and evolutionary realities. What are you ultimately trying to get to? That any grievance, if the grievance, this individual or group of people shares a gender, shares a sex with the individual or individuals that set that system up, their grievance should not be taken as seriously? Is that what you're getting at?
I've said several times that...
I mean, I'm asking you a different question.
But on the same topic, that if it's a man making a decision for men, then it shouldn't matter, is what you're saying?
I'm asking, maybe it doesn't matter as much. What are you trying to communicate by saying, but men set that system up?
Because men complain about the system that they themselves set up. So if they didn't like the system, then why wouldn't they have changed it?
Hold on. So just to be clear, you think 18-year-olds who are drafted into the military have the political capital to change the system?
No, but the system was still set up by men.
Should they not complain?
They can complain.
Men can complain?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
Do you think that warfare and conflict and tribalism is a part of human nature, or do you think that it's something that men do?
Warfare in general?
Warfare and tribalism.
I think it's human nature.
Right. So do you think that if there were women in power, if we were just all of a sudden run by queens, even though they wouldn't be able to enforce anything, if we were run by queens, then do you think that there would be no war? It would be sort of John Lennon
I don't think there would be no war, but I do think that the way that men handle conflict versus the way that women handle conflict is very different. So I think if women were quote unquote running the world, there would be more communication and probably less casualty. But
do you think that there would be less war if it was up to women?
Yes, I don't think war would be non-existent.
You think the girls would just have a chai latte and just talk it out?
No, I didn't say that at all. Okay. There's two ends of the spectrum, but I do think women are more communicative and men are usually are more physical. So they handle conflicts more physically. Women usually handle conflicts with emotion and communication. You don't have to agree. I mean, that's just...
So, I mean, what's your prescription, though? So you're saying, okay, men complain about war. Well, tough, because men set that system up. Like, what is your actual prescription?
Exactly what I said.
I mean, I didn't really hear a prescription.
The women should run things. We should have a matriarch and they'd all get together with the gals and have a chai latte and there'd be no fighting. I don't know why this is like
so hyper-focused on me for every question, though. It's a little bit strange.
It's because when we ask you to actually state your position, you just go, you like look around, give like weird face, and then say, "I already said that." You can just say it again, maybe in a more. Maybe we're too stupid to understand, so just say it in a more.
That's not true. I've said the same thing on abortion several times, and it was just a runaround. I've said the same thing on this topic, and it's just a runaround. So we just don't agree.
I'm exploring your worldview. I'm not repeating questions.
No, you're speaking down on it, is what you're doing.
How am I speaking down on what? It seems like you're speaking down on us. You're dismissing genuine male grievances by simply saying, by using the apex fallacy, oh, this 0.0001% of men who do have power. Meanwhile, the average man has absolutely no power. In fact, the average man tends to fare worse than the average woman. And then if you look at the bottom rungs of society, most men occupy the absolute worst outcomes in society, whereas women in general tend to have like a higher standard of living, the average woman does, than the average man. So you might look at the man in the CEO or the executive or the really rich guy, and you think that that's the experience of most men or all men, but it's an apex fallacy. It's a very, very small percentage of men that enjoy any sort of supposed or alleged privilege. Most men live unremarkable lives. Most women average women compared to average men, have far more privilege in a myriad of different ways.
We can agree to disagree.
I'm not going to agree to disagree. Explain to me the worst outcomes that women face as compared to the worst outcomes that men face. For example,
this is exhausting.
Sure.
I mean, it's just on me. Like, this is very strange. There are 6 other people at the table.
If any of the other girls want to jump in with a coherent argument, I'm happy to hear it. But so far, you're the only one that's biting. So that's what I have to go off of. When it comes to homelessness, for example, do you care to take a guess at the percentage breakdown of homelessness between men and women?
I think somebody else can take a guess.
Okay, well, I'll just tell you then. 80% of homeless are men. This, to me, seems like it would be a worse life outcome. So how do we reconcile this amazing privilege that is bestowed upon men? I assume you believe in the patriarchy. How could it be the case that there's this patriarchy that exalts and raises men up, and they have this fantastical privilege and their lives just go splendidly without any issue? But all of the worst negative life outcomes drastically, disproportionately impact men. I mean, do you just want to concede the argument? I'll move it on if you just want to concede. But
I've said this now the 4th time. Somebody else can talk. This is like the hyper focus is strange. Somebody else can bite.
Okay, what if they're not willing? I mean, I'm literally going off of your own positions. Because, okay, we are exploring your statement of who set that system up. So I'm exploring that worldview. That's why I'm talking to you. None of the other panelists forwarded that worldview. Is this the like healthy, you know what stonewalling is? Is this what you do in a relationship?
No.
Oh, okay. All right. I mean, you're doing it live on stream.
Like, this is a boundary that I've said several times. Focus on somebody else.
I'm literally, agreed to come on like a discussion show.
Right, and I've explained my stance several times, and you're asking.
I'm not asking you to repeat it. I've literally forwarded different questions and positions for you to like either try to rebut or contend with.
Can I add something?
I'd love that.
All right, I'm just gonna say she concedes the argument then. Go
Okay,
ahead.
well, so I wanted to add something because you can correct me too if I'm totally off or whatever, but I think where she was getting at with that comment was going back to earlier discussion about the abortions and how men shouldn't have a say-so on women's body, even though men passed that law to have a say-so on women's bodies, like them being able to have abortions. So moving like forward into this conversation, she's basically just like going back to that, like, well, men made those laws the same way, like we don't feel men should have a say-so on women's bodies and what women do.
Wait, hold on.
Something like that.
There's a massive amount of conservative women who are part of the electorate, and you have women on the Supreme Court, you have female politicians, senators, etc. Like, would you guys be okay? Like, let's assume, and actually I think there's more women voters than there are male voters. So if the majority of women voted to ban abortion, and if I said, you guys who are pro-choice, if I was like, oh, well, who set up that system? There's a majority of female voters.
Okay, and that's exactly where she was like going with the like war thing, and that's completely okay if you said that. Like, my standpoint is I'm a very different woman compared to the women that are on that panel. Like, I'm a minority, I'm younger, like these are like really old, like you said, like conservative white women who are making, like he said, there's a lot of not two-parent homes in the Black community. It's more known in that community than y'all's and stuff. So like for us, if we know this man is not going to stick around or do this, like, and we're like, oh, okay, I want to have an abortion so I don't raise my kid in a one person household, maybe that's their standpoint. I'm not speaking for myself, but yeah.